you never gift your tithe, okay? So let's say we're having an offering. It could be a missionary up here with the saddest sob story you've ever heard. It could be that the youth, we've talked about the youth are going to camp, and a lot of you have sponsored and given money. That should never come out of your tithe. Now, there's a couple reasons. But again, is anytime what you're essentially doing is you're converting your tithe into an offering. And I think several months back I preached the 4 types of giving, and I'm not going to go into that today. But you're converting your tithe into an offering, and those are different, and the spiritual principles behind them are different. And so you never want to take your tithe and make it a gift. You never want to say, "Oh, they're sponsoring Kids for Youth. I don't really have any extra. Let me take, if my tithe would be $200, let me take $100 and put it towards." You never want to do that because you're going to end up paying a lot more than $100 to send that student to camp. There's some principles there. And I want to illustrate the importance without diving in the next half hour on this principle. And again, maybe I'll try to find that message. I probably won't find it, but I'll at least think about finding it and put it on Facebook so you guys can watch it. It was just so long ago, I don't know how I'd find it. But this idea here is just to illustrate the severity of this is I want to use the federal government one more time. They're really helping me out today, aren't they? Wow. So we're going to use them one more time. Did you know that when you write a check, or anytime you give technically, a check's really the only way you can get in trouble with this because they're attached. But when you give an offering, well, let me ask you this way. Someone grab one of the giving envelopes. Give me one of those real quick. Okay, got it. A bunch of them. That wasn't what Palm Sunday felt like. Okay, I'm kidding. Okay, on this, it says Calvary Ely, name, date, and it has, do you ever wonder why it says, tithe, offering, missions, why you can fill that in? You ever wonder why there's an option to say what you want it to go towards on here? Is because you legally are not supposed to put what it goes towards in the memo of your check. Did you know that? Or like when you give online, it gives you drop-down options, general fund, youth, cafe, there's different options in there. Is because if you dictate, the government has recognized that people giving to a church and dictating, aka controlling how the money is spent, is a bad idea. So if you give in a way with a string attached, you give to the church with an element of control, the government says that is not charitable, it's not tax deductible. You cannot count that on if you do file a long form, that doesn't count. So if you give, let's just put it this way, let's say you give $10,000 to the church over a year, but half of it, you're like, no, this is going towards this. I want to put this on this check. This is how this money has to be spent. And the other half is you just put it in the offering. That means that when the government looks at that, if you get audited, they're going to pull that extra $5,000 out and say, no, this doesn't qualify because there was an element of control. Again, the government, a secular institution, recognizes people trying to control the church through money is a bad idea. We sometimes don't figure that out, but the government has figured that out, right? And so that's why typically we'll either give an offering because you're like, well, but I want to give towards a student. I'm just using this as an example because we've had, we're going to camp. So many people have given to sponsor students, but I want to be able to sponsor a student. How do I tell you? Well, that's why it's on the offering envelope. So you don't write, on the check. You don't have to write on a check. You don't have to, we do special offerings. Those are ways for you to designate without control. But technically, because we would never do this would be like very bad financial stewardship on our part. But technically, we could then take that money you gave and use it on something else. So when you do write on the check, we can't. So like, let's say someone writes a check today and puts it in the offering, and they write $200 and they write for snow removal. That's all we can use that money for. So I'm like, here, Tristan, here's $200. Go buy some salt and maybe an extra shovel. There's nothing else we can use this money for. Because now we are legally bound to use it for exactly what you said. Now, if you're thinking, well, I don't care. I don't do any of that anyways. I just write on there because it's helpful for me and it lets you know. That's fine. But just to let you know, your heart is then probably in the right place. But yeah, so this idea of where your money should go and all that stuff, it's very much a heart issue. And for whatever reason, even the government is like realizes that there should be a actual generosity and not a controlling feature. Because there's plenty of horror stories about people going, well, Pastor, I'm the biggest giver, and I'm gonna withhold my tithe if you don't vote this way or do this way, or if you don't stop, right? And there's horror stories about that, and the hardships that can put a church under.